Hello and welcome everyone, we Weeb online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Had to Save Cursed Hinata Part 3. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Neji looked nervously around the Hyuga compound's perimeter. There were a few guards on duty, and he didn't want them to know he was entering. There was no doubt that they would ask where he was going, and if he responded correctly, they would easily put two and two together. Hayashi wanted to confront Neji, and unlike his daughter, the branch family member knew he would not forgive. He had, after all, let Konoha's most treacherous villain mark his esteemed clan's heiress, and hell would definitely be raised, regardless of how composed his uncle normally was. Neji also recognized that it was unjust. There was only so much he could have done to protect Hinata from someone as ridiculously powerful as Orochimaru. Someone even the Sandaime would struggle to take out, let alone a team of genin. But Hayashi wouldn't care, and that was fate. He assumed fate had been kind to him this time, and as much as he hated to admit it, he was relieved that another slavery seal hadn't been added to his body. Perhaps it was fate's way of making things right, showing a privileged and fortunate member of the main family what it was like to live with someone else's intrusive and controlling seal. Or maybe it was just to get him into trouble with Hayashi. Perhaps Hayashi would force him to retire as a shinobi. Fate was a fickle creature. With a sigh, he straightened himself out elegantly so as not to give the guards in front of him the wrong impression, and walked towards the gate. Hayashi, what would you do to him? Was he going to be tortured so Hayashi could show him what it was like to feel the pain his daughter had felt? He was aware that she hadn't awoken in a day or two, and he was aware that there had been an incident or two when she did. He didn't hold Hinata responsible for what was about to happen to him, not because he was certain she would never do the same, but because it was simply fate. It was fate's fault that the snake-like traitor had appeared in the forest. Shaking his head slightly, he brushed past the guards without so much as an acknowledging glance. It appeared that they were aware that he was meeting with Hayashi, because they opened the gate when they saw him. He walked quickly into the compound, not needing to use his Byakugan to find Hayashi because he knew where the clan head would be. His house was where he always held these meetings that Neji felt were only ever held with him. It was ironic, because the only time he was ever allowed to enter the home of a major family member was when he was in trouble. Not the kind of trouble where he'd get slapped on the wrist and told not to do it again, but the kind of trouble where he'd end up on the floor with his infernal seal activated as a form of punishment. When he'd truly overstepped his bounds, Neji was well aware that he usually put on an emotionless mask. He took pride in being able to detach himself from the world and all its folly, those who were so unaware of the predetermined impact that fate had on their lives. But at the moment, there was a pit swelling in his stomach that nothing could quell. It didn't matter that he couldn't change what was about to happen. He was nervous, scared even, and there was nothing he could do to calm the eerie feeling coursing through his veins. The genin took a deep breath and attempted to console his breathing as he approached Hayashi's home, which was near the front of the compound because it was the largest and made a statement about the Hyuga's wealth to others. It wasn't off pattern, but it was still uneven, something so subtle that only the greatest perceptual masters would notice it. Looming in front of the door, he took a quick look around before pushing it open. He didn't knock. Hayashi wouldn't care about etiquette at this point, and bowing respectfully. I see, so that's the best course of action then, echoed through the house. Neji's brow furrowed as he looked down, unwilling to look up until he was acknowledged. If I were in your shoes, I would not shelter her and coddle her with guards. Instead, give her some space while also attempting to help her cope with what has happened. A more unfamiliar voice responded. Neji moved. Hadn't they heard him walk in? I see, then I'll take your advice. There's still no way for you to remove. Hayashi's voice cut off abruptly, and Neji heard the man clear his throat. Oh, Neji, I was wondering when you'd show up. Neji took a few measured steps forward into view, realizing that his uncle, who was on the other side of the living room wall, must have used his Byakugan to see through the wall. Please accept my apologies for my tardiness, Hayashi-sama. Who is this? Inquired the other man's unfamiliar voice. He stood out in a Hyuga household because of his unkempt, spiky gray hair. A member of the branch family. My nephew, Hayashi said softly as Neji bowed once more. It's no problem. What I wanted to talk about is probably more important. But first, let us finish the formalities. Huh? The gray-haired man asked, scratching his chin in confusion, right in between the two red streaks running down his cheeks. Formalities. Hayashi ignored him as he locked eyes with Neji. As you've probably guessed, this is Jiraiya of the Sannin, the third Hokage's most prized student and master of seals. Well, I wouldn't say master just yet, chuckled Jiraiya as he took a step forward to assess Neji. However, I do know a thing or two. Neji's eyes widened as he tried to look the man over from head to toe without being too obvious. Was this a member of the illustrious Sannin? He was much older and more carefree than the other one he'd had the pleasure of meeting. He had a healthier complexion than his teammate, who was sickeningly pale even for a Hyuga. I see. I am honored to meet you, Jiraiya-sama. Neji bowed again, trying to hide his surprise in his voice. Normally, I'd say the pleasure is all mine, but unfortunately, I've come on much more grim terms, Jiraiya said, his voice becoming huskier. From what I understand, Hinata, your cousin was bitten by my former teammate, Orochimaru, during the second stage of the Chunin exams. I'm sure you've heard of the twisted things. I was present. Neji interrupted in an unusual manner, but he felt compelled to say it. You were there, huh? Jiraiya asked, surprised to elicit such a response from the young ninja. So, do you know what the implications of having such a seal are for her? Neji's face sagged. I am aware that Hinata life-samas will never be the same as a result of my failure to perform my duty during the second stage of the Chunin exams. Failure? Jiraiya asked, looking at Hayashi, who had an empty look on his face. What are you on about? I allowed Hinata-sama to be bitten, Neji said, slightly biting his tongue and refusing to look at his uncle. Do you mean you handed her over to Orochimaru? Jiraiya asked, quickly assessing the situation. Realizing that the kid must have resorted to blaming himself because he had nothing else to blame for the unfavorable outcomes. Because even if you just stood there stunned as the event unfolded, you'd have already done better than the vast majority of genin or even a few chunin in your situation. People have been known to commit suicide in the presence of Orochimaru's ghastly killer intent. No, Neji said, shaking his head slightly, remembering how the man's aura had been unlike anything he had ever felt. I fought him, but I failed miserably, so pathetically that Hinata-sama managed a better offense. Jiraiya looked at him, puzzled, before letting out a small chuckle. Kid, I can only imagine what happened in that forest, but I can guarantee no genin in history could have confronted Orochimaru on a one-on-one basis and survived. Hell, the man could even destroy entire ANBU platoons if he really wanted to get serious. The fact that you survived is a win. Whether he took pity on you or for whatever other reason doesn't matter. But nothing, Jiraiya interjected. Get it through your thick skull, kid, that you were spared for whatever reason, and you should learn from this, understandably. This whole situation got messed up when my former teammate decided to come along for the ride. But while half the competition was killed in the forest, you came out alive, learn from this and hold your head high. I suppose you're right, Jiraiya-sama. Fate decreed that I live. Fate wouldn't give a rat's ass about what happened to you in that forest, Jiraiya interjected, once more attempting to remove the thought of an all-powerful being from Neji's mind. Your destiny is yours and yours alone. You survived a clash with a S-ranked criminal, which is something to be proud of. It doesn't matter that you got your ass handed to you, you survived. I believe this meeting has veered off topic, Hayashi said, reminding the other two that he was still in the room. In a minute, Jiraiya said, shaking both the Hyuga clan's leader and Neji, who simply stood there dumbfounded that someone would show such disrespect to his superior. Kid, if there's one lesson I can teach you right now, it's that fate is a fickle thing that simply sits in the back row and watches as the game continues. It doesn't decide the path you take, it doesn't guide you down any road, and it doesn't choose how you live your life. Take whatever the world has in store for you, and if you don't like it, return it tenfold. Neji simply stood there dumbfounded for a moment, feeling Jiraiya's eyes on him. You've given me a lot to think about, he finally said before bowing to the two shinobi. Pardon me if I interrupt. As Jiraiya's words sank in, Neji left the room without saying anything else, the Hyuga boy lacking the courage to continue the conversation. As he walked down the corridor, he couldn't help but raise a hand to his forehead protector, not to touch the metal, but to acknowledge the seal that it concealed. His gaze scanned through a window to the two guards stationed at the compound's entrance, recognizing them and knowing that they, too, bore an identical seal. Neji hadn't even realized he'd stopped moving as he looked out the window, his gaze now averted to the sky, where several birds danced without a care in the world. Deep down, he realized that the chances of the main branch using the seal he wore against him were slim at best, perhaps so slim that he could simply stop caring about it and live his life freely like the winged animals that soared through the air. Perhaps. What the hell was that? Sakura exclaimed, surprised. And not sure. Guess they decided to go somewhere, muttered Sasuke. Naruto must have gotten all worked up about ramen or something again. He hasn't had it in a long time. But that was Hinata dragging Naruto away, Sakura said, emphasizing each word so much that she almost spat. A snowball has a better chance in hell than that. I guess you're right, Sasuke said after giving it some more thought before moving on. Anyway, I guess our work here is done. We should get some rest before we resume training tomorrow. Wait, Sakura begged, hoping that her crush wouldn't leave so quickly. Can we still Naruto, we haven't gotten to the bottom of that thing with the examiner, right? Right? Sasuke said, but remember, we did come to a dead end. It wasn't so much a dead end as a dead start, Sakura recalled. We didn't get very far, but if we change our strategy a little and start from a different point, we might get an answer. Sasuke pondered this for a moment as he scratched his chin. There was that thing Jiraiya mentioned about seals to Naruto. Personally, I've never seen the dobe shut up that quickly before. He recalled the incident on the road. Seals, Sakura said again, recalling that moment on the walk back to Konoha. The only real seals I'm aware of are storage seals, the seals on exploding tags. And this one Hinata now has, none of which are particularly related to Naruto. So we can assume that we're talking about a different kind of seal here, one that isn't usually known by Genin or even Chunin, Sasuke said, looking towards the town center. We might be able to get somewhere if we worked on two different areas. Maybe you looking at the history of seals while I looked at seals commonly used by shinobi. Sounds like a plan then, Sakura said as she began walking to the library, Sasuke close behind as the two began their research. However, their research topic was having a very different experience. Hinata, where are we going? Naruto asked for what seemed like the umpteenth time. But Hinata still refused to answer as they moved deeper into the training grounds, out of sight of anyone. The blonde suspected Hinata didn't have a destination in mind and had lost all coherent thought a long time ago. While his theory was implausible, it was not far from the truth. Only after they were out of town did Hinata realize she didn't have a specific destination in mind, but had simply felt the need to go somewhere private with Naruto. The feel of his hand in hers kept a crimson flush on her cheeks, and she was relieved that the blonde couldn't see her face from behind her. This was a perfect moment in and of itself for her, but she couldn't help but want more from the situation, although she wasn't sure what else she could do to soothe that feeling. She was certain that if it hadn't been for the constant running, she'd be shaking like a leaf in a hurricane or passed out cold in the grass due to a lack of adrenaline in her system. I don't know, she admitted hesitantly, a deep blush deeper than Naruto's whiskers reaching her cheeks as she finally found the courage to speak. Hinata slowed to a halt and refused to look Naruto in the eyes, fearful of what her actions might be. Naruto stood there in silence, unsure what had happened to the normally shy girl. The sun had begun to set behind the Hokage monument, and amber beams pierced through the tree leaves, dancing upon the two genin. Hinata, Naruto said softly, not wanting to do anything that would get him in trouble with his teammates. Naruto-kun, Hinata replied softly when she finally mustered the courage to turn towards her crush. Her eyes darted downwards abruptly. Despite mustering the strength to turn towards him, she lacked the fire to look Naruto in the eyes. What would his reaction be if he found out? Despite the layer of mischief that accompanied the orange jumpsuit he wore every day, Naruto was a good guy, so how would he react if he discovered she had been touched by something so evil, so impure? Will he distance himself from her once he realizes she has been tainted? Or would he simply never see her in the same light again? Hinata was well aware that she was only a passing acquaintance in Naruto's life, an almost friend at best. But that was still preferable to being perceived as evil. She had already attacked Kiba, and he would undoubtedly find out about it. Wrong? What's he asked, puzzled, taking a step closer to her. It doesn't matter if you don't have a place in mind. Hinata sniffled and covered her eyes with the sleeve of her baggy jacket. Naruto wasn't the type to abandon his friends, and he wouldn't try to leave her side. But dragging him down with her by being friends with him wasn't fair. She was now essentially a disgraced clan chief. Being an orphan was preferable. All of this could have been avoided if she hadn't been so useless in that fight. Everyone else escaped unscathed, but Orochimaru struck and bit her because he saw a weak, little girl in her. To make matters worse, she'd attacked her own friends not long after. What kind of monster was she turning into? Why don't we go to Ikaraku's or something? You look like you could use a bowl of ramen, he said, and she didn't have to look up to notice the smile in his voice. He was such a nice guy. Hinata burst into tears with a slight shake of her head that only the most skilled analysts could detect. Naruto didn't deserve her. She only spelled bad news. She had progressed from being completely useless to being so useless that she would unexpectedly attack her own allies. It wasn't fair for Naruto to have to deal with the consequences of her own vanity. Hinata turned around again, this time away from Naruto, as tears trickled down her cheeks like tiny silver snails. She buried her face deeper into the sleeve of her jacket as she ran away in the opposite direction, her sobs eloquent but uneven. The Hyuga pushed away from the boy next to her, desperate to get away and cry her heart out. Before a jolt ran through her body, the distance between them grew gradually, first a meter, then 2, and finally 5. Not electricity, but the strange but all too familiar sensation of it. As buzzes of pain flew through her body in random spurts, she closed her eyes, tears still leaking through her eyelids. She found herself suddenly disconnected from the world around her, the horrible sensation causing too much pain for her to pay attention to what her senses were telling her. Black lines appeared out of nowhere, rushing along her creamy skin as if plowing through snow, and she felt another jolt run through her. She couldn't help but draw parallels between herself and a pitiful zoo animal being tortured as she let out another cry of pain. Her vision, the last of her senses, began to blur slightly, and she found herself struggling to make out the trees a few meters away. As her vision finally faded into darkness, she could see a distinct blur of orange approaching her. "Look at this," Sakura said, motioning Sasuke to her side. The Uchiha had had little success researching seals currently used by shinobi. Many shinobi lacked the time and effort to delve into the art because it was such a delicate art that took hours, if not days, for amateurs to place in advance. He had to admit, however, that the level of design and nature behind some of the rare seals he had come across had impressed him. Even the simplest one he imagined would take him days to study correctly. Every drawn line had to be perfect, and he had a newfound respect for those who created sealing scrolls and exploding tags. "What is it?" he asked, closing the distance between them. "I was thinking about how the Naras pass down their techniques from father to son, and then their sons continue the lineage," Sakura explained. "When you think about it, Naruto does have a family name, but it had to come from somewhere, so I started digging into old clans, and that's where I found it." "What did you find?" Sasuke inquired. Sakura approached him with a dangerous glint in her eye. "The Uzumaki family." This surprised Sasuke a little. Part of him had assumed Naruto was simply from a civilian family who had been killed during the Kyuubi's rampage so many years before. But where are they? "Dead," Sakura stated solemnly as she returned her attention to the scroll in front of her. "The clan's remnants are probably scattered around the world, but the majority of them were wiped out." "Any reason why?" Sasuke inquired, sensing that they were getting close to solving this mystery. Apparently they were relatively close to the Senju clan, so it could have been an attack from one of Konoha's enemies who harbored a grudge from one of the previous wars. Sakura continued to read. The only other thing notable was their skill with Fuinjutsu, which made other Ninja Town attempts look like children's drawings. As he returned to the scrolls he had been studying, Sasuke couldn't help but wonder if the members of the Uzumaki clan could draw those seals with their eyes closed. He remembered Jiraiya saying something about Naruto knowing something about the importance of seals. Thus, by connecting the dots, it appeared that, had Naruto still had his parents' heritage, he would be drawing seals more complicated than anything he'd seen so far. "Closing time," the librarian announced, and both members of Team 7 knew it wouldn't be worth risking their luck after last time. They left the library, having put their scrolls away and feeling like they were getting closer to figuring out who Naruto was, only to run into one of their classmates walking down the street. "Hey, Shikamaru," Sakura said, waving to the Nara heir. "Hey, what were you two doing in the library?" Shikamaru inquired, taking in his surroundings. "A little research," Sasuke said casually. "On?" Shikamaru asked, his Nara brain already in overdrive. Sasuke wasn't going to say anything, but Sakura was well aware of how smart Nara could be when he wanted to be. She was certain that the black-haired kid had attempted to figure out who Naruto was at some point, and it appeared likely that the boy could offer some insight into what they had discovered. "We're trying to figure out why everyone hates Naruto," Sakura explained, checking to make sure the rest of the street was dead. "Something doesn't add up," Sasuke added with a nod. "I can count all the people from previous generations who like Naruto on one hand. So, what have you got so far?" Shikamaru inquired idly. "This is the kid who runs around in bright orange screaming at the top of his lungs. He's not that bad anymore," Sakura said, crossing her arms across her chest. "But we've gotten nowhere. What exactly are you looking for?" Shikamaru asked again, realizing that if he didn't flee soon, he'd be dragged into a full-fledged debate. "There's only so much statistics and history can tell you. Sometimes you just have to look around." "I guess there's no harm in telling you," Sasuke concluded, looking to Sakura for support and receiving a subtle nod. "There was something odd about how we were kicked out of the Chunin exams. Naruto didn't cheat, but he was still apprehended," Sakura continued, emphasizing the final word. "He may be an eyesore to some, but there's a fine line between forcing someone to fail an important test and harboring a grudge. What exactly is so bad about Naruto that an instructor would do that, on top of having at least 20 other assistants who did nothing?" They'd think we'd coup. We're not even foreign shinobi. You'd think they'd coup. You mean like how he's the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Shikamaru said, stifling a yawn, as if it were common knowledge. Sakura and Sasuke only blinked a few times as they tried to comprehend what Shikamaru had just said. Several seconds passed as their jaws steadily descended to the point where onlookers thought they were about to eat the dirt they were standing on. What? They exclaimed in unison, causing the Nara to wince. Shikamaru sighed and rested his hand on his brow. Troublesome. Those who knew the trio beforehand would say that the scene before them was exactly what they had envisioned. Naruto standing apart from Sasuke, who appeared to be brooding over some unknown topic, and Sakura standing close to the Uchiha's side. The reason for this, however, was quite different from what most people would think. Naruto had had the fun job of piggybacking the Hyuga back through the middle of the area he had been dragged through the day before, after being left alone with Hinata and the girl having fallen unconscious. Needless to say, they were not the happiest bunch of people when they discovered the girl passed out. Then, having to sit with the clan's leader and go through a step-by-step analysis of everything that had happened was, to say the least, unpleasant. Naruto had requested to stay by Hinata's side until she awoke, but he had been dismissed and informed that the situation was under their control, and that despite his good intentions, he would simply be in the way. He had no idea what to tell his teammates and didn't want to repeat every detail that had been forced out of him less than 24 hours before. It didn't help that Sakura and Sasuke were staring at him strangely. The pink and black-haired members of the group had kept a close eye on Naruto after learning what they had learned from Shikamaru the day before. The Nara had escaped at the first opportunity he had, literally half a second after realizing he was going to be interrogated, and had left them with only the answer to their question. But it was the same as being told the answer to a complicated question was 27 without being told how the answer came about. Sakura and Sasuke had returned to the Uchiha clan compound in silence before writing everything they knew down on a piece of parchment, trying to figure out how Shikamaru came up with that solution. They couldn't believe he'd been told such a thing, because otherwise it would have been common knowledge, and they concluded that the Nara would have found it too difficult to simply converse on such a topic with anyone who didn't truly know the blonde. Working backwards from the answer to the question, they came to the conclusion that Shikamaru had been correct. Naruto was born on the same day that the Kyuubi attacked, and he bears all of the villagers' scorn, including the whisker marks on his cheeks. They had no way of proving their theory without actual solid evidence, but it was unquestionably the best lead to go off of. They couldn't ask Naruto the big question because even the blonde might not know the answer. "I don't think I've ever seen you three so quiet," Kakashi said as he appeared nearby, startling the trio and temporarily pushing their thoughts to the side. "Kakashi-sensei, you're late," exclaimed Naruto, pointing accusingly at him. "That's because I needed someone to help supervise your training today," Kakashi explained, pointing to the side to show the white-haired ninja they had been sent to retrieve on their previous mission. "You're going to be watching us?" asked Sasuke, hoping that by watch he didn't have to change into a girl and make out with his teammate again. "Yep, your team is the only group of rookie genin who aren't taking the current Chunin exams," Jiraiya said, taking a step forward until he was standing next to Kakashi. "I want to see if that means you'll be slacking off while they're pushing themselves to the limit, or if you'll show them that your team is the one to fear the next time." Jiraiya knew he'd said the right thing when he saw their eyes fixate on his words, even if they didn't respond. "Good, I would have been disappointed if you had responded with words," he continued. "Prove to me what you're capable of. Jiraiya here has offered to help with a training session that we've devised," Kakashi explained. "Your mission is to protect a client, which in this case will be me, from an invader who is attempting to kidnap the person under your protection. I won't go all out because that would ruin the idea," Jiraiya explained. "That being said, if you want to succeed, you'll have to go all out on me." "Can we have a scenario?" asked Naruto, drawing everyone's attention to him. "Creating a protection plan would be easier if we knew what we were protecting." "Makes sense," Kakashi said, shrugging his shoulders. "All right then. Jiraiya here is a Chunin who has been hired to take out a competitor in a shopping district. The person who hired him having shown his constant distaste for a business merger that is soon to take place, and in order to gain an advantage over his competition, he has hired a bargain ninja to prevent the merger from going through, and you three have been hired to ensure that the weaker of the two parties has no problems." "That's a pretty shoddy scenario," Sasuke said, wondering if such a mission would ever happen. "But it's still a scenario," Kakashi said, smiling behind his mask. "You have 10 minutes to devise a strategy for protecting the client while they sleep in their home. Could you please mark out an area that best describes the household, Kakashi-sensei?" Sakura inquired. "It's easier to plan our strategy if we know how much space we have." Will do, Kakashi said as he set about building the scenario, knowing that simple sticks on the ground wouldn't suffice. Alright, Sasuke said as Naruto and Sakura huddled close to discuss the best tactics to use. We have a limited amount of time to devise a plan to trap a Sannin. It doesn't matter if he's only using a fraction of his strength. This is the time to prove to everyone that we've learned something and that we are the team to fear. Sakura and Naruto both nodded before the blonde realized what Kakashi had built for them. How the hell did you build that? Naruto asked, pointing to the 4 walls and roof that Kakashi had constructed using several earth jutsu. By using a good portion of my chakra, Kakashi explained, looking fairly winded, indicating to his students that he wasn't willing to do this on a regular basis. I'll be sleeping in the main bedroom, please keep me safe. With that, Kakashi entered the mud building he had built, allowing the team to quickly assess what it was they would have to protect. As expected, a window near the main bedroom created another opening for them to try to secure. There are only 2 main areas Jiraiya could enter, Sakura said, pointing to the window and the main door. That being said, he could use an explosive tag to burst his way in through one of the walls, Naruto explained. He can enter quietly or proudly, and knowing the pervert, it could be either. You guys are running out of time, Jiraiya yelled from a safe distance away, not wanting to know what the trio had in store for him. Alright, Sakura, do you have any of those poisons you've been working on? Sasuke inquired. I made one last night, Sakura said, pulling a vial from her pocket. She had created some poisons to take her mind off of other things after being unable to sleep after learning of what could potentially be trapped inside of Naruto. Naruto, remember how you went over all of those trap lessons with Kakashi? Could you set something up like that to protect Sensei? Sasuke asked his teammate, looking to him. All that and more, Naruto said, his smile almost blinding. Alright, here's the plan, Sasuke said as the 3 huddled together. This should be interesting, Jiraiya said as he took a step forward toward the impending danger. He knew he had nothing to be concerned about. If things got a little too chaotic, he could simply turn it up a notch. But more often than not, he wouldn't have to. Jiraiya was well aware that this was for the children's training, and that crushing all of their hopes and dreams in a matter of minutes would be unjust. Looking towards the building he was supposed to enter, he noticed Sasuke perched on the rooftop overlooking the front of the house, his eyes scanning the horizon. Dropping into the trees that surrounded the training ground, Jiraiya realized he'd have to wait a while for an opening to appear, and chances were he wouldn't be making a break for the front anytime soon. Circling the area, he noticed the ninja with his nose buried in one of Jiraiya's books through the window Kakashi had purposefully put in, a sight that the white-haired sage couldn't help but smile at. His expression darkened as he realized that with 2 other ninjas still missing, they would not leave such an opening so easily. When he turned his gaze to the ground, he noticed a glint of sunlight reflecting off of a piece of wire that had previously been installed. Jiraiya couldn't tell what the trip wire would do, but it was enough to convince him that he needed to try another approach. Can't get in from the front, can't get in from the sides. Guess that leaves the back, Jiraiya said, darting to the back of the house in a dash that few could match. Jiraiya pondered what the best course of action would be while standing against the wall, but before he could do anything, the back wall exploded outwards, forcing him to leap away to avoid harm. Jiraiya blinked several times, shielding his eyes from the debris, as he found himself surrounded by the 3 genin he had been attempting to avoid, a kunai dripping with poison held by his side. What? Jiraiya asked, blinking several times to ensure he wasn't hallucinating the situation. Well, this was unexpected, Kakashi said, looking at what had happened to the building he had built. Never once during the mission briefing had he stated that the house had to remain intact, and while they would undoubtedly have to have a little more consideration for the client's property and valuables when actually out on a proper mission, he couldn't deny that if it saved their lives, they would be grateful. Okay, you got me, Jiraiya said, raising his hands and allowing the genin to relax their stance. So tell us what the hell you did and how the hell you knew I'd come from behind. Well, with the limitations of the training, we deduced that there were only a few places you could come from, smirked Sasuke. With me guarding the front entrance, you'd have to take an alternate route to avoid being spotted from the start. So we had Naruto set up several tripwires covering the sides of the building with the limited time that we had. So, what did you have set up with those traps? Jiraiya wondered, wondering what joys awaited him if he triggered the wires. Absolutely nothing, Naruto said with a sly grin. What? Jiraiya inquired. With the few minutes I had, I wouldn't have been able to set up anything elaborate that was well hidden, Naruto explained. We had Naruto create the illusion that the sides were protected when in fact they would have been the easiest ways to get through, Sasuke explained. Cheeky sods, Jiraiya said, realizing that he had seen the wires almost too easily. How about the ending? Well, with 3 of the 4 walls gone, you'd have to come from behind, above, or below now that I think about it, Sakura explained. How did you know when to strike with the exploding tag? Jiraiya wondered, not knowing what the final piece of the puzzle was. That was my part to play, Sasuke explained, holding several tiny wires in his hand. These were tied to ground points, and when I felt them loosen, I knew you'd pulled the trigger, and I slammed the roof to warn those inside to let loose with the explosions. I have to say, it's quite a feat, Jiraiya said, slightly taken aback by what he'd been told. Sure, they knew when and where he was going to appear. When on a mission, they could be waiting for hours on end for an attack that might or might not occur, so they were given a generous heads up on that point. Apart from that, Jiraiya couldn't fault what the 3 had done and knew that they had all contributed to this in some way. Almost no time would have passed while he waited in the trees for them to set up the trap. You've assembled quite a crew here, Kakashi. Seems like I do, said the copy ninja, who was as surprised as the sage by the results. He'd only taught his students the fundamentals of everything they'd just demonstrated, and he wondered what they'd be like once he started teaching them more advanced techniques. It had taken a collaborative effort from all of them to create the plan, and if they had more time, they would have most likely done things differently. Even if he was being gentle with them, capturing the Sannin had been no easy task. We're awesome like that, Naruto boasted, beating his chest with his fist, an act that elicited a small smirk from Sasuke. So, what do you want us to do now, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura inquired, curious as to what their teacher had in store for them now that the impromptu test had been passed. Well, I didn't expect you to pass that on the first try, Kakashi admitted sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head as he considered what he'd have his minions do. At this point, I'd like you to focus on your water walking and chakra reserves, while your teammates are on the front lines, and you'll be playing more of a supporting role until you're capable of keeping up with them, which, given Naruto's energy, might be some time. Sakura huffed slightly at the comment, but couldn't help but agree with Kakashi. If the 3 of them started fighting at the same time, she would be the first to slow down, and as a result, Naruto and Sasuke's performance would suffer as they would have to assist her in completing the task at hand. She nodded in agreement and dashed off towards the river to continue her training. She was not going to slack off, not now, not ever. All right, Sasuke, Kakashi said, turning his gaze to the Uchiha. I want you to create a single shadow clone that will spar with Sakura atop the water, as you probably know. It only takes a single solid attack to take out a shadow clone, so they need to know how much they can fight without taking damage, allowing them to fight for longer. Got it, Sasuke said as he created the single clone. The duplicate nodding in agreement before rushing off towards the river Sakura had earlier approached. Meanwhile, I'll put you through a series of random hand seal combinations, Kakashi continued. Once you start copying more jutsu with your Sharingan, you'll need to be able to both remember and replicate the proper hand seals as quickly as possible when you want to use them. Sounds good, Sasuke said, realizing that this training session would most likely benefit him in the long run. Wait, what am I going to do? Naruto wondered. You'll be working with me, Jiraiya stated. You mean the dope here is going to get one-on-one time with a Sannin? Sasuke wondered, feeling like he had gotten the short end of the stick. I'm not good enough anymore, am I? Said Kakashi, chuckling. The reason Jiraiya will be training Naruto is that there are some things that Naruto needs to be taught that I am unable to teach him, which is why Jiraiya has offered to. Even if you sat in on this, you wouldn't learn anything useful, the white-haired sage said. Only Naruto is capable of learning this. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as he recalled the information he and Sakura had discussed the day before, and he couldn't help but wonder if Jiraiya was referring to the Kyuubi or something else entirely. As much as he wanted to, he couldn't simply voice his opinion in front of 2 of the village's more powerful shinobi. He had a feeling that would not go well. Are you going to teach me something awesome? Asked Naruto, his voice brimming with anticipation. Follow me and we'll find out, Jiraiya said as he leapt away, an orange blur close behind. Let's get started, Sasuke, Kakashi said, the Uchiha nodding as he set about getting this part of the training done correctly. He'd figure out more about his teammate's enigma in his own time. Peering through the trees near the river, Ino couldn't believe her eyes as she watched her rival go toe-to-toe with the last Uchiha in what appeared to be an attempt for both parties to kill each other. The Yamanaka heiress had decided to spar against Sakura in order to improve her own abilities against the pink-haired ninja, and she had no doubt that she would be completely superior to her friend in every way. All of that had vanished within the first few seconds of seeing her friend for the first time since the first round of Chunin exams. Not only was she walking on water, which she had yet to master, but she was also fighting her crush with such ferocity and malice in her attacks that it appeared as if any single one that landed would be a devastating blow to say the least. Beyond that, she could see that Sakura and Sasuke were both smiling. They appeared to be having the time of their lives, putting their hearts and souls into their fists. Sasuke's fist pierced Sakura's guard and struck her friend across the face, sending the pink-haired girl bouncing across the water. Sakura wiped a small trail of blood from her lips on her hands and knees, her smile never leaving her face as she pushed forward to confront Sasuke once more. Ino turned around, satisfied with what she had seen. She wanted to show Sakura that she was superior to her, but it would take weeks of dedicated training to close the gap Sakura had created between them. Hinata stood awkwardly along the clearing's edge, where she saw Naruto deep in conversation with the unknown white-haired man. She had no idea what she was doing here, especially after the previous day's disaster. When she awoke, the previous day's events played over her head like a busker who only knew one song. She had pondered over and over what she could have done differently. Or, more importantly, whether she was capable of doing something differently. She'd been given the perfect opportunity to express her feelings for the blonde and had choked, the hatred and self-loathing having triggered the seal on her neck to respond, her negative emotions feeding it and slowly strengthening it. Hinata despised the searing pain that the seal caused when it spread across her skin. But how could she resist activating it when she couldn't even look at Naruto without hating herself for not being able to get any closer? Was this to imply that she should never see the blonde again? The alternative was to be able to approach Naruto, but this did little more than remind her of how weak she was. She knew that moving on, removing Naruto from her life, would be the best option for her health. But how could she do so? His smile shone brightly, and his upbeat demeanor directly contradicted her low opinion of herself. Who would want to remove someone like that from their life? Naruto-kun, she murmured softly under her breath, still debating what she should do. So, what exactly are you going to teach me that only I can learn? Naruto asked, stretching his arms and sneaking a glance in Sasuke's direction. Though the blonde could no longer see him, he could tell the Uchiha's interest had been piqued. How about we take a different approach? What do you want me to teach you? Jiraiya asked, before seeing Naruto's grin and adding, except a badass jutsu. Who? What were you good at again, old man? Naruto's smile faltered. Well, they say I have a way with seals, Jiraiya said, emphasizing the last few words as he cast a glance at Naruto's stomach. So, like exploding tags? Naruto inquired, unsure of what the Sannin was trying to convey. He was certain it was one of those underneath things that Kakashi loved to discuss. Yeah, but you'd probably learn a lot more about them from a textbook than I could, the pervert replied. I don't remember much about our seal lessons, Naruto admitted shamefully as he bowed his head. What's the deal with them? Jiraiya groaned. Many things, but I don't think they're your true calling. What I was trying to say was that I know a lot about your stomach seal and how it works with your little friend. I guess I'll call you if he ever breaks free, said Naruto, clearly not understanding what Jiraiya was implying. I probably wouldn't be able to do much in that situation because I'm not the fourth Hokage. But have you ever noticed your little friend lending you a helping hand when you've been in a pickle? Jiraiya wondered, realizing Naruto had never interacted with the Kyuubi before. The kid, like most shinobi his age, had led a relatively normal life until now. I've never met him before, but I don't think he'd be friendly, what with him being a big rampaging monster and all. Do you mean you've never experienced anything special that might not have happened if it hadn't been for the Kyuubi sealed in your gut? Jiraiya asked, raising an eyebrow. It was still possible, but the previous test had shown him that Team 7 were no rookie genin. And any genin worth their salt had been in a life-threatening situation before. There was this one time. It's a long story and I don't remember much of it, but I thought someone had killed Sasuke, Naruto recalled. We'd been having this really long and difficult fight with this insanely fast person named Haku, and I went berserk, like really crazy. Kakashi said it could have been the Kyuubi. But I guess I forgot about it because that was a while ago now, and because of everything that's happened since then. Sounds like that was the work of it. Jiraiya pondered as he stroked a non-existent beard. Anyway, my point is that you're supposed to be able to draw out the Kyuubi's chakra. I'm guessing you didn't pay attention in class, but even you should know that such chakra is hundreds of times more potent than regular chakra. Do you want me to try a jutsu on it or something? Asked Naruto, thinking the demonic shadow clones didn't sound so bad. No, Jiraiya stated emphatically. At least not any of the ones you're familiar with. I'm sure doing so would result in one of two outcomes. Either the jutsu would fail to work, or you'd be unable to properly mold such thick chakra, and it would backfire and explode on you. Probably don't want to find out which, then, remarked Naruto, cringing slightly as he considered the implications of the latter. Exactly. Now, as for what I was trying to say earlier, if I could get you to draw on this raw, potent chakra, you could do some interesting things. While I've got a few ideas, one comes to mind first, Jiraiya said, grinning slightly. I'm sure you've heard of Jiraiya's numerous ventures. Gallant Toad Sage, Naruto said dismissively, waving his hand. Yeah, you wouldn't stop talking about it the whole way back to Konoha. What's your point? Well, you're no fun, Jiraiya grumbled before taking a more serious tone. What do you think that last bit, Toad Sage, means? Do you have warts on your tongue? It means that I hold the summoning contract of the Toads. Has that piqued your interest? Jiraiya scowled half-heartedly. I suppose they'd be useful for eating flies on a hot day, Naruto joked. However, unless I want to lick someone to death, why would I use a toad? They're not frogs, you brat. There's a difference, Jiraiya snarled. I guess I'm not going to let you sign the contract after all. Naruto's demeanor changed slightly. He knew a little bit about summoning contracts. They'd piqued his interest when he thought people would blow each other up with large, scaly dragons. But he'd lost that interest quickly when he learned that a turtle was considered a rare summon. But he hadn't expected the perverted sage to offer him one. He had assumed Jiraiya was planning on using them for training, but that was clearly not the case. All right, fine, I'm listening. Good, Jiraiya said, eager to get started on his strange theory. Summoning contracts require chakra, and it requires a little bit of control over said chakra. But you don't have to mold it like you do with regular jutsu. What I'm thinking is that if we can get you access to this supposedly potent chakra, we can have you get a feel for it while also giving you access to the best summons out there. I don't get it, Naruto admitted, having followed Jiraiya up to a point. Why can't I just use my own chakra? I mean, I think I have more than Kakashi-sensei. That you do, brat, Jiraiya said, nodding. But what you don't realize is that you're used to shaping chakra, not just releasing a large amount and letting your blood do the rest. It's different. And also, think of your chakra as a huge flabby muscle. Sure, you've got potential, but Kakashi's is healthy and defined, well used. I'm still perplexed, Naruto admitted. I constantly use shadow clones. Why isn't my chakra muscle healthy or well used? It's one of the disadvantages of being a massive bank of chakra, Jiraiya explained. You rarely reach into the depths of your chakra, and as a result, your muscle isn't well defined. Because, like any regular muscle, you must push it to its limit in order to keep it in good shape. He shook his head, so don't worry about it for now, just listen to what I'm telling you to do and you'll be able to summon toads. Right, Naruto nodded, grateful for the man's final summary as he had gotten lost long before the man even mentioned chakra molding. Hinata's pupils constricted as she watched Naruto converse with the older man. It hadn't taken her long to recognize the man as Jiraiya of the Sannin, especially since he seemed to boldly proclaim it every few minutes. But what was going on? Naruto appeared engrossed, but he also appeared to be lost. Unlike the lessons they'd had with Uruka-sensei at the academy, where the blonde usually expressed disinterest. It was strange, she couldn't recall him acting this way with a teacher before. His body language showed respect, but it seemed to contradict his almost constant yells of pervy sage. She still felt awful, but watching the boy had helped alleviate the sense of helplessness that had been coursing through her veins for the past few days. Though the small surge of confidence she'd felt was like a tiny, lit candle floating on top of a vast ocean, threatening to go out at any moment, she'd almost summoned the courage to approach him and apologize for the events of the day before that hadn't gone so well. And the moment she stood up, she found herself ducking down behind the bushes once more. It wasn't surprising that she was too useless to even take a single step. But she was getting used to it. Maybe if she was a little bit stronger. You're just going to leave me to read your perverted book somewhere, Sasuke said, looking at his sensei. Despite the fact that the previous few hours had been extremely repetitive, he knew it would have aided him in the long run. If he had to guess, he would say he could now perform an 8 seal jutsu between a quarter and a half second faster. While it didn't seem like much, he was well aware that it took less than a second for one's life to end, and that, in a battle between ninja, even the smallest of time periods helped. Actually, I was planning on asking Kurenai if your former classmate Kiba would be interested in sparring with you tomorrow, Kakashi explained. Given that he'll be competing in the finals in about a month, I'd assume he'd be looking to push himself against some good competition. However, if you're not interested, just go, Sasuke said casually, dismissing his sensei. The older man walked away in a puff of smoke, leaving the black-haired teen to run his fingers through his hair. It wouldn't take much to send the Inuzuka clan member scurrying back to the kennels, but now was as good a time as any to put some of the new skills he'd learned during these training sessions to the test. He imagined that if his father was still alive, the head of the Uchiha clan would be disappointed that he hadn't advanced as quickly as his brother. He would have been enraged if these thoughts had occurred to him when he was given his headband identifying him as a genin of Konoha. But it was only a fleeting thought now. He got a little bit further every day, and he wasn't comparing himself to his brother or the rest of Team 7. But then, why should he? A wave of memories came through as he turned his head to see Sekiro walking towards him, a white cloud indicating that his shadow clone had just dispersed. Before his mind could delve into how he and Naruto were two sides of the same coin, Sekiro spoke up before he could even begin to piece together what had happened. Your clone was ruthless, Sekiro said, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. You wouldn't want me going easy on you right now, would you? Said Sasuke, his teammate slightly irritated. It would have been nice if I could have actually landed a hit instead of playing the dodge game for the better part of 2 hours, Sekiro said, putting her hands on her hips and doing her best angry mother impression. I'll tell you what, I could use something to eat. Shall we see if Jiraiya and Naruto are done? Knowing Naruto, he's probably hungry. Sasuke simply shrugged his shoulders as the two of them began to walk side by side across the clearing. The mass amount of white smoke filtering through the air indicated that his shadow clones were bursting one after the other, so they didn't need to see the blonde in particular to know where he was. The reason, however, was a mystery to both of them. What do you think he's learning? Sekiro inquired. Sasuke couldn't help but pause as he tried to think of a reasonable response. This was apparently something that only Naruto could learn, which scared the Uchiha a little. Did this mean he'd be taught some outrageous jutsu due to his massive chakra reserves? Or would it be something more focused on a creature that may or may not reside within the blonde-haired teammate? I don't know, Sasuke said slowly, because he couldn't think of anything to say. There were theories and possibilities, but if he hadn't been given full proof by this point, he wasn't going to shout his ideas down the street like a preacher. However, he hoped to have the answers he sought soon. It would be an understatement to say that watching the blonde continuously beat the living daylights out of himself was entertaining. Whenever the herd of Naruto clones shrank in size, the blonde was ready to summon another batch without depleting his reserves. Having repeated such a high-scale jutsu on a repetitive basis eventually wore the boy out, much later than the Toad Sage had anticipated, and the teenager was a heaving broken mess kneeling in front of the elderly man. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed slightly as he heard a few nearby leaves rustle. A glance to his right confirmed that they had an uninvited guest with them, and it didn't take long for him to recognize her as the Haigua heiress, the reason he had been brought back to Konoha in the first place. He considered just letting the girl do whatever she was doing because she didn't appear to be harming anyone. But the fact that he was going to teach Naruto how to use the Kyuubi's chakra dissuaded him. The chakra was too dangerous to practice in front of random bystanders, and he knew Naruto would never forgive him if the boy's secret was revealed without his permission. Jiraiya sighed as he realized he had two choices: avoid using the Kyuubi's chakra for the day's session, or scare the little girl away. But something in the back of his mind told him that the latter was a bad idea. Orochimaru had marked her, and from his conversation with the Sandaime, he had gathered that she was far from emotionally stable. To appease the little nagging voice, he convinced himself that summoning a toad wouldn't be too difficult. In any case, the boy should get a sense of what the whole thing was about. So, you do know what a summoning contract is, right? He asked, more to conceal his discovery of the Hyuga's presence than to cast doubt on Naruto. Yeah, Naruto said. It's this thing you sign that allows you to summon a specific type of creature into battle. But the cool thing is that you usually sign it with an entire species, so you can summon a variety of creatures. That's a good lesson to learn right away. Jiraiya agreed. Although summons are commonly used for battling, they also have a variety of other uses. They make loyal and dedicated messengers, which is probably my favorite way to use them, but they're also great for cooperative battling. To be honest, I guess it depends on which toad you're summoning. There are a couple of medic toads as well, pondered Jiraiya, so they can be used for a variety of purposes. Got it, nodded Naruto, eager to sign the contract. He could work out the minor details later. Alright then, you're about to become one of the world's only people who have gotten their hands on the toad contract, Jiraiya said as he bit on his thumb, summoning a toad with the small amount of blood while flashing through the hand seals. As it took its place next to the perverted man, a small puff of white smoke appeared, and a rather large toad croaked loudly. This is Gamma, Jiraiya said, motioning with his thumb to the large toad beside him. Perhaps one day you'll summon him as you pass this contract down to someone else. Naruto frowned as he looked at the thing. It wasn't the battle toad he had expected, but he remembered the Toad Sage's words and realized that this toad's purpose wasn't combat. What exactly does he do? Aside from being an awesome companion, Jiraiya said, striking a pose that Naruto mimicked. Gamma holds the summoning contract. See that scroll in his mouth. You mean you're just letting it chew on the summoning contract? Inquired Naruto, unsure whether he wanted to sign what would undoubtedly be a sloppy piece of parchment slathered in drool. Relax, he's just protecting it. And besides, one of my toads wouldn't be dumb enough to eat an important contract like that. Huffed Jiraiya, crossing his arms. Gamma let out a sigh and extended his tongue, presenting the scroll to Jiraiya, who took it before tossing it to Naruto, who quickly caught it. Put it open. All right, Naruto said, laying the scroll down and spreading it across the stones in front of him. Those are the names of all those who have been able to summon toads in the past, Jiraiya explained as Naruto examined the names in front of him. He imagined that if he had paid attention in history class back at the academy, he might have known some of the first people to sign the contract with the toad. Instead of writing your name in ink, you'll have to write it in blood. Nodding, Naruto began to work as Jiraiya looked over his shoulder, knowing Hinata was watching from the shadows. He hoped he wouldn't be punished for this prank, but the only person in the village who could actually punish him was his old sensei. While it would undoubtedly be painful, he could live with it. Sasuke and Sakura were surprised to discover that they weren't the only ones intruding on what their teammate was doing after nearly walking into the clearing. Hinata, Sakura said, slightly perplexed, causing the Hyuga to eep at being caught. Hello, Hinata said, trying not to run away from the confrontation. While she had noticed Jiraiya's attention shifting to her from time to time, she had assumed he was simply speculating that someone was there and that she hadn't been caught yet. It was quite embarrassing to be caught out in this regard. The two members of Team 7 knew not to push any boundaries with what their friend was doing there because it was fairly obvious in and of itself. They were also aware of what was on Hinata's neck and knew that they couldn't say anything about what had happened. They simply stood there in awkward silence for a few seconds, before a vexing yell erupted from the clearing. Would you like to come with us to offer our support to Naruto? Sakura asked, breaking the silence between the three of them as Sasuke appeared to walk into the clearing, curious about what was going on. I'd like that, Hinata said, taking tentative steps out into the open, Sakura by her side, the pink-haired girl doing her best to be there for her friend. Seems we have company, Jiraiya said, pointing over his shoulder to Naruto's teammates, and the Hyuga heiress. You guys, Naruto said slowly, grateful that the depressing little tadpole had vanished back to where it had been summoned from. We're here for you, Sakura said, hands behind her waist and a genuine smile on her lips. Come on, Dobe, show me what you're capable of, smirked Sasuke. Do your best, Naruto-kun, Hinata said, still adjusting to being out in the open. Concentrate and repeat, Jiraiya instructed, to which Naruto nodded before turning his back on his allies and beginning to shape chakra. Nonetheless, their presence caused a flurry of thoughts, forcing Naruto to stand in silence for a few moments. Could he have prevented Sasuke from becoming a pincushion if he had been able to summon a worthy toad to fight alongside them during the battle against Haku? Or would he have simply wasted his chakra failing miserably over and over until both Sasuke and Sakura died? Could something similar happen the next time the team was on the road, and his own lack of skill resulted in their deaths? Fox, Naruto murmured under his breath. I don't like you, and chances are you don't like me, but I'm going to need your help at some point, and if you're going to help me, I need to know what you're capable of, so why don't we show these guys what you're capable of? Nothing happened for a few seconds, but then a deep laugh escaped Naruto's mind, followed by a massive surge of chakra into his system. Hinata couldn't help but activate her Byakugan as power seemed to surge from the blonde-haired boy, allowing her to see the chakra that was circulating through Naruto. Instead of the normal chakra she saw, this was malevolent and dark, and she couldn't help but lift a hand to her shoulder as she gradually realized she wasn't the only one standing there with something twisted and evil in her. Sakura and Sasuke were intrigued by Hinata's hand movement and wondered what she could see with her bloodline activated. Before they could think about it any further, their teammate went through several hand seals before slamming his palm on the ground. Kuchiyos no Jutsu, exclaimed Naruto before everyone was lifted high into the air. When the smoke cleared, they discovered they were standing atop a massive toad. Impressive, kid, Jiraiya said, impressed. It appeared that if Naruto set his mind to something, there was no telling how far he could go. The toad on whose head they were standing wore a black kimono and carried a Sasumata in his hand, as well as a massive shield strapped to his back. Whoa, said Sasuke as he realized what had happened, and Sakura squealed about how disgusting what she was standing on was. Running his hand through his hair, Sasuke realized that his sensei was correct in saying that this was something only Naruto could do, at least for the time being, until his own chakra reserves peaked. Naruto-kun, Hinata exclaimed, astounded by Naruto's ability to shape this dark chakra and accomplish something so extraordinary. She'd been told repeatedly not to use the seal around her neck, but if she could replicate his actions and do something so incredible, would it be worth it? Whoa, Naruto exclaimed as he realized what he had done before the entire toad shook slightly from side to side, causing everyone to wobble a little. What the hell? Sorry, I'm a little clumsy, Gameken apologized, still perplexed as to why he had been summoned when there appeared to be no battle going on. All he saw in front of him was a jounin of Konoha wearing a mask over the lower half of his face and a headband over a single eye, who appeared to be completely confused about what was going on. Sasuke sighed and lowered himself into a ready stance. With a cocky grin, his opponent mirrored his actions, the Inuzuka's dog barking loudly in support of its friend. Don't expect to win this, Sasuke, Kiba mocked, his voice arrogant but friendly. You may have kept a hair's length ahead of us all at the academy, but I've really grown since I became a genin. Have you? Sasuke inquired, a smirk on his face. Though, as Naruto had demonstrated, someone with no notable prowess as a shinobi could improve quite dramatically in a short period of time. He seriously doubted that the long-haired boy in front of him could have increased in skill as exponentially as Naruto had. That said, he would never say that to his blonde-haired teammate. You'd be surprised, Kiba snorted. If you don't come at me with everything, I can't guarantee you won't look bad in front of your team. Kiba concluded, motioning to Sakura and Kakashi on the sidelines next to his own team. One of the key questions that arose at the start of the day when the two teams met was where Naruto was, and Team 8 had been informed that he was suffering from mild chakra exhaustion after performing some heavy jutsus the day before. While Kiba laughed at how pitiful the blonde was, Sasuke and Sakura exchanged a look, saying that if the Inuzuka had seen what Naruto had done, the feral boy would most likely have soiled his pants. What none of the genin realized was that the entire story about Naruto having chakra exhaustion was a ruse concocted by Jiraiya and Kakashi. The real reason Naruto was absent was that he had been instructed that by allowing the fox to allow such a surge of chakra into Naruto's network, they needed to ensure that the seal had not been damaged from the inside. This also meant Naruto couldn't do anything too strenuous because it would agitate the seal even more. If everything went well, they could conclude that the seal would not be broken anytime soon, and Jiraiya could begin teaching Naruto how to better harness the power that the Biju had given him. Trust me, if you don't come at me with everything, I probably won't have to show you more than half my strength, Sasuke boasted. Huh, you've always been a bad bluffer, Sasuke, Kiba chuckled before beckoning with his right hand. Now that we've squandered enough time, let's see if you've got a bite to back up that bark of yours. Sasuke didn't need an invitation to close the gap between himself and the other boy, smashing a fist into Kiba's gut. Kiba, contrary to what Sasuke had expected, did not collapse and managed to stay upright, albeit with a slight wheeze. The dog-like boy snapped a knee up and connected with Sasuke's chest before the Uchiha could adjust. He hadn't anticipated the cockier boy packing such a punch, but Sasuke ignored it as he used the momentum from the Kiba's attack to backflip away and catch his breath. He was about to charge back at his sparring partner when he noticed Akamaru charging for him. The dog was quick, but it was so small that sidestepping it was almost effortless. As he prepared to return his focus to Kiba, he noticed that said genin had already taken advantage of the distraction and was charging at him with a ferocious punch. Seeing it in time, Sasuke managed to raise an arm to block it and kick himself off Kiba's thigh, giving him some breathing room once more. What the Uchiha had failed to notice was that Akamaru was following him, and he paid the price as the much sharp teeth sunk into his left calf. Sasuke cursed as he lashed out with his foot, as he hadn't expected to shed the first blood of the match. Though he wanted to admire his work as he heard the dog's yelp, landing a few yards away from the two shinobi, he couldn't because he noticed the Inuzuka boy up in his face again. They're double-teaming me, Sasuke observed dryly. It was a fairly obvious tactic, one that wouldn't work against anyone for long, but Sasuke found himself powerless to stop it. He could have used lethal force, but that was hardly appropriate given that it was only a spar. He exhaled loudly after closing his eyes for a second, acutely aware of the incoming attack from the approaching Kiba. His eyes opened a split second later, his irises bloody red as two Tomio circled each pupil. With his Sharingan activated, it was easy to figure out that the Inuzuka was attempting a feint, so Sasuke shoved him backwards and forced him to lose his balance in the brief time period between the fake punch that the feral boy threw and the kick he attempted. Kiba was a strong man, so the sudden loss of weight caught him off guard, and he was left defenseless as the Uchiha unleashed a barrage of punches. Akamaru approached Sasuke once more, but a furious bark revealed his surprise, and Sasuke tossed a shuriken at it, stopping the puppy in its tracks. He noticed movement at the edges of his vision and returned to Kiba, surprised to see that the boy had vanished. Sasuke noticed the boy making a beeline for his dog a split second later. Unsure of what the Inuzuka was up to, having rarely seen the boy's techniques, he watched with mild curiosity as the white animal was scooped up and quickly slipped something from Kiba's pocket. With astonishment, Sasuke watched as the dog's fur turned red. It's been a lot of fun, but I'm afraid we're going to have to take this seriously now. Kiba smirked as he placed the dog on top of his head and flashed through a few hand seals. Shikiaku no Jutsu, exclaimed Shikiaku. The boy sank to his knees and leaned forward, almost giving up his bipedal status. Sasuke braced himself, expecting Kiba to charge at him, but was surprised to see him form more hand seals instead. You shouldn't have let me get this far so quickly. Jin Bunshin. Akamaru transformed into an almost exact replica of Kiba and sprang off the boy with a small puff of smoke. Sasuke leapt forward and attempted to knock the disguised dog aside after noticing that his movements were unsteady, more feral than those of his partner. His blow was easily deflected, and the Uchiha fled, Kiba no doubt rising to attack and clobber him from behind. The Uchiha smirked as he deactivated his Sharingan after a few seconds of breathing time. With what he had planned, he couldn't afford to use up any more chakra than was absolutely necessary. That's an impressive trick, but don't think you're the only one with a secret weapon. Kiba chuckled as he asked, "What are you going to do? Throw a fireball at me? Copy one of my jutsu?" In the latter case, Kiba was undoubtedly far more skilled at using his familial jutsu than the Uchiha in front of him. No, Sasuke smirked, lowering his voice to a whisper, "Kage Bunshin." Sure enough, a Sasuke replica worthy of Naruto appeared next to the Uchiha, surrounded by puffy smoke. Let's raise the stakes a tad. With a clone, Kiba shook his head, clearly misunderstood by Sasuke. I'm sorry to break it to you, but Akamaru here isn't a figment of your imagination. He can actually harm you. Sasuke fought the urge to smirk, and he knew his shadow clone had to as well. Sasuke advanced, eager to end the henge on Akamaru before either of the two Kibas could land a solid hit on his shadow clone, noting that he'd have to be a little more careful now that he couldn't use his Sharingan to distinguish between man and beast. It was times like these that made him secretly envy Naruto's infinite chakra battery. Sasuke was almost certain that he couldn't risk making another clone if he wanted this battle to last much longer. Plus, he had a reputation to protect. Naruto would never let him forget that the best of the class had been defeated by a mutt. Leaping forward, both forms of Sasuke charged at the two versions of Kiba, who fought back. Their strategy was simple. One of the clones would vanish as soon as contact was made, and the one who had walked away unharmed would refocus their attention on the real Sasuke, and the double teaming would resume. Unfortunately, it was not to be, as both Kibas were knocked out cold by a boot to the chest. Kicks came in from opposite sides, knocking both Kiba and Akamaru into each other before either of them could comprehend the situation as to why both of them had been injured. Kiba reached into his pocket and pulled out a smoke pellet, tossing it into the ground and allowing purple smoke to hide both himself and Akamaru from view as he tried to figure out what had happened. There's no way Sasuke could have done that himself, Kiba reasoned. He couldn't let the mystery go unsolved for much longer, as Sasuke would undoubtedly milk it for all it was worth. He quickly smelled the Uchiha and his clone. No doubt a stupid strategy because it wouldn't matter if he confused them. Unless, that's all, the clone has the potential to harm us in the same way that Akamaru has the potential to harm him. Kiba, on the other hand, knew that the Uchiha could not have cloned himself. Sure, his clone could deal damage, but as with any clone jutsu, a solid hit would suffice. Thankfully, he figured it out before Akamaru was hit again and potentially lost his transformation. However, before he could think about his next move, the temperature began to rise and he and Akamaru leapt out of the way just as a massive fireball passed through the smoke cloud. Turning his gaze to Sasuke, or what he assumed was the real Sasuke, he noticed the Uchiha performing several hand seals, and Kiba braced himself for what he assumed would be another fireball of some kind. It just wasn't meant to be. Raiden, Hekayarki, yelled Sasuke as he slammed his hands down on the final seal, small volts of electricity dancing within his palms. Kiba braced himself, not knowing what Sasuke had in store for him, until the Uchiha in front of him clapped. With the lightning in his hands, this was no ordinary clap, as a thunderclap rang out with a deafening roar. Both Akamaru and Kiba covered their ears, the sound nearly unbearable as Kiba struggled to keep his eyes open. However, Akamaru was faring much worse as he crawled into a ball on the ground, trying to drown out the sound of his whimpering. This was all the space Sasuke's clone needed before slicing Kiba's throat with the cold, sharp edge of a kunai. "This is my victory, Kiba," Sasuke declared, wondering if the Inuzuka could hear him yet. "Good job, you two," Kakashi said as he closed the gap between them with Sakura by his side. Hiranai and the rest of her team were close behind them. "Looks like you got me. Next time you won't be so lucky," Kiba said as Akamaru reverted to puppy form. "Did you really have to make that jutsu so loud?" "It worked, didn't it?" said Sasuke casually as his clone vanished. "Anyway, Sasuke, while you're like this, you and I are going to spar for a little while longer. See if we can build up your stamina a little," Kakashi said, eager to continue pushing his students. Given that it was the first time he had seen Sasuke use the technique he had taught him, and in such convincing fashion, he reasoned that he needed to reconsider just what the Uchiha could do. "What do you want me to do, sensei?" Sakura asked, looking up at the silver-haired teacher, while Kiba received words of encouragement from his team for a job well done. "Considering the vast amount of poisons you will most likely be working with, I brought some of the more common ones, as well as books describing just what they do to the human body that you will most likely come across in a bag near the river," Kakashi said, pointing to the water source. "I want you to start injecting yourself with minute amounts of these poisons to begin building up immunity in case something goes wrong during the fight." "Got it," Sakura said as she moved closer to the river. "Thank you for your help, Kurenai," Kakashi said, turning to face his fellow Jonin. "I'm sure Kiba learned a lot from this spar," Kurenai said as she placed her hand on the boy's shoulder. "Come on, Akamaru, let's go get something to eat before we get right back into training," Kiba said, not letting his loss dampen his determination in the least. "Do you want to come get something to eat, Shino?" "Thank you for the offer, but I will decline because I believe I will use this time to train. Given that you managed to get a spar in, I believe I may have fallen behind ever so slightly, and I will use these few minutes before you resume to catch up on that small gap," Shino said solemnly. "Suit yourself," Kiba advised. "How about you, Hinata? Would you like to grab some lunch?" "Actually, I have a meeting with my father, and it would be impolite for me to be late," Hinata explained. "If you'll excuse me," Hinata said as she began to walk away from her team. And while Kiba and Shino didn't notice, Kurenai couldn't help but notice the retreating girl. She hadn't been informed of any meetings Hinata had to attend when she picked her up this morning, so she questioned the girl's statement. But if she wasn't returning home, where was she going? Sakura sighed, her feet soaking in the cool water as she looked around the lake. She looked down at her left arm, where a small gash had appeared from where a poison sendon had come into contact with her skin just moments before. After researching a few basic poisons, she discovered that every single book advised, stressed, that the reader develop an immunity to whatever poison they intended to use. She figured it made sense. The last thing she needed in the middle of a dangerous mission was to prick herself with a strong toxin and have to compromise her mission. It was also beneficial in that by developing resistances and immunities to specific substances, her immune system would become a little stronger, making her less susceptible to annoyances like the common cold. She examined the small jar of poison Kakashi had purchased from a ninja store. It was a weak strain of a paralyzing toxin that would eventually make the person's muscles harder to move. It wasn't much, and she had used slightly less than the recommended amount, but Sakura didn't want to rush things because she was new to the field. She'd rather take things slowly and at her own pace than rush ahead wildly. That was more Naruto's domain. She admired the finesse of the blob-filled, green, gooey liquid that made up the volume of the glass jar as she twisted it in her fingers. She hoped that one day she would learn how to make her own poisons, as the ones sold in ninja stores were the best. Rarer and more interesting ones were less frequently available in stores. On the one hand, she assumed they had to keep an eye out for rookie genin like her, who were too eager to get their hands on some cool gear, which was probably why the store she had visited didn't stock any deadly strains. While she had mastered the fundamentals of poison making, it still took time and money to obtain the necessary ingredients. So purchasing the products in store was actually cheaper and easier. Having said that, with their supplies so limited, she assumed that if she came across another person wielding poison, it would be of the same variety as hers until she could better use the tools and ingredients at her disposal. She admired the tranquility of the setting. She got some much-needed alone time with Naruto confined to his bed and Sasuke continuing his training with Kakashi. The girl was surprised to find that she could still move her hand with relative ease after flexing it slightly. The poison had entered her bloodstream, giving her a slightly queasy feeling, but it did not appear to be impeding her movement. Perhaps she should have stayed with the recommended amount. The weak strain wouldn't have done much for her anyway, and it would almost certainly take longer to kick in now. Sakura sighed, pushed chakra to the soles of her feet, and rose to the surface of the water. Though she was confident that she could still walk to exercise her chakra reserves, the girl chose to simply stand still because drowning in a body of water did not appeal to her. She'd be safest if she stayed in shallow water. Sakura let her mind wander as she focused on staying afloat and not falling in and drowning herself. It didn't sound good to be wet and paralyzed. As he fell to the ground, Sasuke sighed in relief. They'd only been going for a half hour, but he was exhausted. "Are you tired yet?" Kakashi asked as he took a step in front of Sasuke. "Strange, I thought you had more stamina than that." I do," Sasuke said after a brief pause to catch his breath. "How come we're on the ground?" "I'm not sure," panted Sasuke as he rose to his feet. He looked up to the masked Jounin, gently massaging his brow as he waited for the man to attack him with another jutsu. "Sit back down," Kakashi said, a more solemn tone in his voice. "Why? I can go on," Sasuke said as he tried to avoid opening his eyes. They felt terrible, like liquid was oozing out, but the genin could tell it wasn't tears. "Just listen to me and deactivate your Sharingan. I believe you may have overused it," Kakashi said. Sasuke obeyed the man's command without saying anything, the pain dulling slightly as he disabled his bloodline. The boy, however, couldn't bring himself to open his eyelids because he was afraid the harsh wind would hurt his sensitive eyes. "Isn't this out of the ordinary?" "I wouldn't know," Kakashi replied. "Because the Sharingan I have is a foreign object to the rest of my body. It essentially leaks chakra. Overuse for me is usually just chakra exhaustion." "Yeah, I remember that time back in the Wave Country," Sasuke replied, slightly wincing as he took a second-long peek with his right eye. "You were gone for quite some time." "I was," Kakashi agreed. "So the Sharingan is less of a cursed blessing for you because it isn't a liability in the sense that if you don't have it covered, you'll quickly exhaust your chakra reserves." Sasuke was taken aback when he heard that from the masked Jounin. Sure, he knew there was a reason his sensei kept it hidden, but he hadn't made the connection that it had done such a thing to him. "So, you can't deactivate it. There's a little logic behind all this madness," Kakashi said, motioning to his face, which was hidden behind his slanted forehead protector and mask. "Anyway, when you do have it activated, it will eat up your chakra almost regardless of what you do." "I don't recall anyone else from my clan having these problems," Sasuke said, despite the fact that he had only been a child when he last saw another living Uchiha. "Many shinobi are proud to boast about their achievements, but few ever tell others about their own weaknesses," Kakashi said, and Sasuke couldn't help but agree. He assumed that once he had unlocked his Sharingan, his family would have informed him about the potential drawbacks of having the Daijutsu active, or he would have had to figure it out for himself. But, you're right, the Uchiha were a resourceful bunch, and some of them figured out a way to keep the Sharingan from becoming a burden while fighting. "What exactly did this entail?" said Sasuke, his brow furrowed. "Well, you're not going to like it," Kakashi said, his voice detached yet amused, as Sasuke had grown accustomed to. "I'll handle it," Sasuke said, gently massaging his eyes with his fingertips. "After all, it can't get much worse than this." Kakashi opened his orange book, assuring his student that everything was fine, and began skimming through the pages. "You've got no idea," he explained after receiving a puzzled look from the boy. "The pain you're experiencing right now is the result of overuse of the Sharingan, and the only way to get rid of it is to get used to it." "Come again?" Sasuke asked, puzzled by his sensei's words. "You need to get used to and comfortable with the Sharingan, so start using it tomorrow and keep it active for as long as you can over the next week." Naruto sat awkwardly in his room, his boredom reaching new heights. He was well aware of the reason he had been confined to his home, and the last thing he wanted was for his tenant to become agitated. He could only imagine what he could do if he could tap into the fox's chakra more frequently. While it was probably not something to do on a regular basis, Naruto's summoning of the toad the day before proved that it was powerful. Looking down at his hand, Naruto's thoughts returned to the previous day, when he had only been able to summon a handful of tadpoles with his own chakra. Though he had to admit that after exhausting his chakra on making hundreds of shadow clones the day before, he had to be happy he had summoned anything at all. He wondered if he could summon a real toad now that his chakra reserves had been replenished somewhat. Naruto was well aware that summoning something as massive as Gameken was unlikely. The surge of power provided by the fox was unlike anything he had been able to produce himself. Looking out the window, Naruto knew he wouldn't give up until he got it. That was just his ninja way. Naruto's attention was drawn to the entrance to his apartment by a knock on the door. "Naruto-kun, are you there?" asked Hinata from the other side, prompting Naruto to sprint across the room from the window to the door in less than a second. When he opened it, Hinata was there, nervously circling her index fingers around one another, but her eyes were determined. Hinata, please come in, Naruto said, waving his hand behind him to let his guest in. Because he hadn't expected anyone to come over, he hadn't bothered to clean up for the better part of a week, which meant that his place looked even worse than when he threw pies at every face he saw at the academy. Thank you, she said meekly, accepting his invitation and stepping forward. She looked at Naruto's apartment, and while it wasn't particularly clean, she saw it as an expression of Naruto's personality. As this was her first visit to Naruto's house, she was surprised to discover that it was actually quite nice. Once you ignored the jumble of clothes and chopsticks that was the couch. I heard you weren't feeling well, so I thought I'd check in to make sure you're okay. Yeah, I'm a little better now, Naruto nodded, realizing she had probably heard from his team that he was suffering from chakra exhaustion. Thank you for stopping by. It was the least I could do after you took care of me the other day. Hinata stuttered as she remembered the day she fainted. What was that all about? Naruto inquired innocently. He had a sneaking suspicion because of the black lines that had sprouted all over her skin, but he figured Hinata would be the best person to confirm his suspicions. Ooh, she nervously bit her lower lip. Was she too scared to tell him? She was too weak to even speak the truth, or perhaps it was because she desperately wanted the words she couldn't say to be false. Would Naruto-kun hesitate in her situation? If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I just thought we might want to go wherever you were planning. Naruto smiled. So he wasn't referring to the dreadful seal on her neck. Hinata exhaled a deep sigh of relief before breaking into a small smile. It was nice to talk to someone without having to bring up the seal, which had been the subject of almost every casual conversation she'd had in the previous few days. That's something I'd like. So, where are you going? Naruto asked, grabbing his orange jacket from the back of his couch. I had no idea where I was going to take you, Hinata admitted, her face flushed bright red. Naruto would almost certainly think she was crazy now. Who grabbed people like that and led them somewhere they had no idea where they were going? Heh, that's fine, Naruto said, laughing and rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. That ramen offer is still open, you know. Let's do it, Hinata exclaimed loudly before sighing. What on earth had caused that? She'd always been in control of her emotions, and she'd never yelled things like that out of nowhere. Haha, okay, Naruto said, chuckling. From there, we'll go get some late lunch. Hinata was relieved to hear that, as she had skipped lunch to check on her crush. Naruto-kun, she inquired, puzzled. Yeah, why yesterday, when you summoned those toads, I watched you do it with my Byakugan, and I saw that you weren't using your chakra. Naruto sucked nervously. He probably would not have used the fox's chakra in the first place if he had known Hinata could see it. He remained silent as Hinata continued. I don't know what it was, but it was violent and dark, Hinata said, rubbing the spot on her neck where Orochimaru had bitten her, a movement that caught Naruto's attention. I think I understand what it's like to have something so twisted and evil give you strength, that power. It's intoxicating, and it clouds your mind. Yeah, I guess it does, Naruto said, perplexed. Sure, the Kyuubi's chakra gave him a slight rush, but it wasn't all that bad. They both looked at each other awkwardly for a few minutes, unsure how to continue the conversation. On the one hand, Naruto knew what Hinata was talking about because she had her own cursed seal, but there was no way Hinata could have known about the Kyuubi. Hinata, too, was perplexed, fearful that she had overstepped her bounds when Naruto remained silent. A loud rumbling sound ripped through the room, and Naruto looked embarrassed as he rubbed his stomach. I suppose we should get some lunch then. Hinata laughed as the dark aura that had been floating through the air vanished in an instant. All right then, let's go, she said as she walked out the still open door, Naruto close behind.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weave offline.